Inorganic podcast goal is to really speak to SaaS companies that are under 300 million in revenue, less than 1,000 employees. And so you guys are like, why are you talking about all these macroeconomic things? It actually comes down to us. All of this drips down to us. Welcome back to Inorganic. My name is Christian Hasselt. I'm your host. This is a special episode of the podcast coming to you live from Deloitte University. 3 things you're going to learn in this podcast. 1, an understanding of the current macroeconomic climate, what is happening according to the Economist and the CEO of Deloitte, and 2, what impact that will have on SaaS valuations and M&A in the year ahead. And we also have a special segment. We'll be just talking a bit about utilization of generative AI in due diligence processes, kind of an interesting rabbit hole on how due diligence might be performed or how you might want to be thinking about performing due diligence in this new world with that capability. Just a couple of nuggets from this episode. Let's get started with it. In this episode, I've got a good friend of mine, Kim Baird, joining me. Kim, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Christian.
We are at what is called the M&A Executive Forum, which is something that Deloitte does every year. And they invite sort of their key clients to this forum. There's only about 100 M&A practitioners here in the room, both people who do integrations, people who do actually deal running, sourcing, like end to end. And this is a representation of everybody from HP to, who was the guy you were talking to? He was from like a roofing company.
Yeah. All sorts of industries are represented here.
It's like cross industry. So it's really great because you get to kind of compare a lot of all of these, your experiences with those who are coming from a lot of different places. So what Kim and I thought we would do is actually share with you some of the insights that we had gathered from the conference. So the first person that spoke was Dan Helfrich. He's the CEO of Deloitte. And he was talking about general market optimism for M&A in 2024. And if you're the CEO of Deloitte and you want to bill a lot of time for M&A and mergers and acquisitions, like you should be really optimistic, but he gave some really good reasoning for it. So we thought we'd talk about that. The first was kind of like, what are the macro economic conditions that drive why we can be optimistic about M&A activity? And he spoke about one, a rate decline's expected, and we'll share in a moment what the Economist said about that. Inflation's lowering, and GDP is strong. And then most importantly, most of the companies that reported in Q4 earnings, which we heard in February, they were strong. It was pretty good. So what that means is that companies are generally really bullish about the future because earnings are looking good. The macroeconomics are looking fairly good. And his summary to us was, if anything, 2024 should be more deals, larger deals, and overall valuations will be up. Those were his key messages. And then we heard from the chief economist at Deloitte, and he had some insights. Maybe you can kind of throw in what you heard.
It was Eric Kalish.
Eric Kalish.
He was awesome. That was so much fun.
He was, yeah.
I've never been so interested in economics.
I didn't expect an economist to be in the room. I was like, all right, this is really cool.
Yeah, it was super enlightening. And he talked quite a bit about the overall economy, obviously, the expected rate decrease in July, which
that's his bet.
Everyone, he said he wouldn't bet the house on it, but he'd definitely place a bet.
Yeah.
So that was really refreshing. And then overall, he just essentially emphasized the same optimism, but not overly optimistic. I mean, obviously, he said
cautious optimism.
Yes,
all economists say cautious optimism.
But all the pointers were very good. I think the risks that he brought up, which were really interesting, were around foreign policy and politics, really not the fundamentals health of the different economies around the world. And maybe, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we should.
A couple of those things.
I mean, the geopolitics that he mentioned, which were interesting and I think not totally surprising, is one is a potential instability in our relationship with China. He said it's good right now, but it could become unstable. And one of the reasons he gave that was enlightening is China's economy has historically been growing very fast, like greater than 10%. And now it's growing like 3 to 4%, which isn't bad. It's not terribly dissimilar to ours, but they're used to growing fast. And that's the way that the Communist Party has been able to sort of say, you know, we're doing right by our people. But given the growth isn't there, his theory is that they could use a catalyst event to kind of change the narrative or change the focus. Did you say Taiwan?
Yeah, he specifically called out Taiwan in terms of, as you know, there's a lot of consternation about what China may or may not do with Taiwan.
Yeah.
And making a move there could create a situation where China could, show their people that they have a reason to stay with the party, so to speak, and to align and create loyalty. And then also in the scheme of the environment with the U.S., cause more issues, more conflicts for us, especially from a business standpoint. And then he also talked quite a bit about cross-border deals and how investment patterns are changing. Separate from the China issue, but just making sure that we knew that there was a lot of investment going into the higher growth countries as a result of investment leaving China, right? So it was a little bit about Indonesia, India, and Mexico in terms of areas where there's more investment going in as an alternate to going to China.
He used the word friendshoring to refer to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an uber insight from two things he said. One is that India's economy continues to thrive and grow very fast. And we see that in labor costs increasing on average 10 to 15% a year. They have a lot of tech companies put talent in India. And when he started talking about Mexico and how the cost of labor is actually cheaper in Mexico than it is in China, which historically was the opposite, I'm seeing like the same pattern developing. So a lot of companies today have tech centers in India because historically the costs have been low. But what is happening is the labor is getting really smart. And I mean, they're already smart before, but they're becoming much more capable of being the frontline servicers of the needs in the US. Mm-hmm. They do run on a different clock, but I think like you could see Mexico coming in. We know that there's several places in Mexico that are already becoming tech centers for companies that want to friendshore or nearshore, if you will. So I think that's a super interesting insight. If you're like a company that's starting now or starting to think about building out your engineering capacity, like a lot of people immediately think Philippines and India, but everything I walked out of there was like, why would you not be thinking about Mexico and LATAM? Because that's where you not only get value, you get the same time zone, which is usually one of those challenges. That's a bit of a rabbit hole, but that was kind of an insight.
Yeah, it was really interesting because the costs of trade are low. Transportation costs are low. And so it becomes a more viable solution for a lot of companies.
Yeah. So the Inorganic podcast goal is to really speak to SaaS companies that are under 300 million in revenue, less than 1,000 employees. And so you guys are like, why are you talking about all these macroeconomic things? This is so way out there. It actually comes down to us. All of this drips down to us. Valuations of companies like Adobe and Salesforce and Oracle, like across the board, they impact SaaS valuations. If you think about a company like Snowflake, a lot of people mark Snowflake to their multiples to the valuations of companies that are cloud or software. And so what this means is that SaaS valuations, they had a rough year in 2023, but by and large, they didn't crater. And now we're seeing signs that they're not only stabilizing, but they're likely to elevate. What this means for companies that are thinking about IPO is probably that IPO opportunities could open up sooner, probably later 2024, but sooner than 2025, which I think a lot of talked about. And the second thing is if you're a company that's more likely to exit strategic, those strategic opportunities might be coming sooner. And the multiples that we were thinking about, being way off are probably actually favorable. I mean, it's still probable. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a Snowflake or a Salesforce or a company like that doing 10 to 15x multiple acquisitions for the right kind of strategic deals, because the market is giving the capital to do it. And if interest rates do come down in July, as the Economist predicted, that's going to make money. It's going to make debt cheaper. It's going to open up those opportunities for companies to be thinking that way. So I don't know. Those are my kind of takeaways from that part of the conversation?
I agree. I think there'll be a pop as a result of a decrease in rates.
Yeah.
And then I think that there'll be other opportunities like strategic exits for companies in the right space.
Yeah. The second thing we should talk about is the session on generative AI.
Yes.
Why don't you start on that?
That was super interesting. And of course, generative AI and AI in general has been a really, really hot topic. And things that we probably didn't think were possible a year ago are now suddenly possible. And that's been really exciting.
Yeah.
Deloitte, of course, has started to create, in their cutting edge way, services to help support transactions as a result of this. So we had a whole session talking about the different ways that AI could help you with a transaction. And about half of the audience was like, oh, we're not really ready yet.
Yeah.
And about a third of the audience was in pilot mode with a lot of different aspects of the deal. I think that, there's certain ways we can take advantage of this today, whether or not you have a lot of, capital or resources to invest in it. I think there's some pretty good tips that came out of that. One of them was using Copilot or an associated tech.
I know. Copilot, I've heard more about Copilot in the last 2 days than anything. Everyone's talking about how great it is. Now I'm a little ashamed because I'm a tech executive and I am, our company is on Google. So all of the stuff I use is Google, and Google had, I use both Chorus, which has some really great AI capability. I do use ChatGPT for some of my work. And Google has some built-in AI that's pretty fantastic, but everyone's talking up a lot of cool things about Copilot. So note to self, get on the Copilot train. I'll go buy a license after this meeting.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a no-brainer because, especially in diligence and as you know, also in integrations where I work, there's a ton of meetings, there's a ton of notes to take. I mean, having those summaries, having that capability to just save like 80% of your administrative time.
Yeah.
And the value of getting that information out to the team. For example, when you're doing diligence and you need to keep everybody apprised of new developments and things like that, it's super, super helpful. And that's not even to say some of the more cool ideas for use that I think we were talking about, right? Yeah. In terms of the future and maybe ways that we could have new perspectives to make better deals.
What was like one cool idea that came out of that session? Like your one takeaway on like use of AI for either due diligence or integration?
Well, I had always thought that, wow, it'd be great to be able to, go through all the contracts and get the key terms.
That was like the low lift, like obvious use case, right?
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But something that you brought up was really interesting about mining customer data that is, in a third-party environment. Tell us about that. I think that was a really cool one.
So here's what I foresee. One of the things that you have to do in GTM due diligence, and I'm speaking to the founders, the CEOs, the head of sales and SaaS companies, when you're thinking about going through the due diligence process with an acquirer, or you're the one doing due diligence, like one of the things you want to understand is what are the reasons why people buy and why they don't buy? Like what are the challenges? And also in customer success, like what are the reasons why customers churn? Very frequently, the things you rely on are the insights from the team themselves. You assume they're telling you what they want to believe or what they perceive. And then you do customer interviews through expert networks, and you usually get some information that way. But the problem is, you only have so much time to gather so much data. What I foresee happening really soon, in fact, like if I do a deal, you can expect that one thing I'll ask for is AI plugin access to Gong or Chorus. Because if you can hit 6 months worth of sales calls and customer support calls, which by and large are mostly recorded, you'll get vastly more insights and summaries of like what is and is not working. And it's not really to disrupt the deal. Most of the time, you're trying to find out why people don't buy because you want to understand what kind of defense you have to build and go to market. What do you have to do with the product to make it really accrete the value of the deal? I mean, I don't know if it's really shutting down the deal. It's more like, let's just get the right kind of understanding of what's happening. So I see that being one possibility. And if you look at like the data produced by Chorus, the data produced by Gong, it's really massive and valuable. Our company has started using it for customer success purposes. I think it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the utilization. But that's one example scenario that I foresee where the data that you're sitting on top of is going to be used for diligence in an interesting way. I think that one chorus use case is kind of a tip of the iceberg example. There's probably many, many more. And I mean, it's obvious right off the top. Yeah, sure, you can do document review and scale. You still have to put your eyes on a lot of the documents. There's other cases that you can probably come up with. But I think the point is, if you're a tech company and you're really forward thinking, you're going to want to be thinking about the ways that you can use AI, generative AI, for either diligence on a target, or the way that diligence might be performed on you, and sort of anticipating what might happen. So I think that was the big takeaway. And we're really only at the beginning of day one. Maybe we come back and talk about day two. Maybe we don't. We're not sure. We just wanted to get some of this info in front of you. I hope it was super helpful. If you liked what we shared with you today, please, as always, like and subscribe. And thanks, Kim, for joining me for this little improv get-together.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
Great to have you here. All right, take care, folks. Cheers.